If you want to understand the economics of industrial policy, that is, industrial policy being done for economic reasons, not, say, to, plug some gap in our national security defense industrial complex. If you want to understand industrial policy done for the sake of prosperity, then you're going to need to use a kind of alternative version of economics. It's not quite the standard version that gets taught in most American universities and that you read in the editorial page of Wall Street Journal, whatever. So it's not that weird. It's not some strange dreamed up scheme. It's based on well-familiar facts. They're just not really integrated into the overall picture of mainstream economics very well. So you take mainstream economics as your starting point, and then you've got to change a few things. Basically, the first thing you got to do, the most important thing, is industrial policy is based on the idea that the free market isn't everything, and you need government interventions in the free market, not on the periphery, but at the very core of the productive heart of the economy. And what you have to do is you have to not only let free markets work, but you need to systematically exploit the gaps in free market logic. Now, when you talk about intervening in the economy, mainstream economics accepts that, but it accepts that for things like non-market provision of public goods, like pure science and national security. It concedes social insurance programs like Medicare, Social Security, and it accepts the efficacy of Keynesian countercyclical deficit spending to get out of a recession. But the mainstream view is that the productive core of the economy, where innovation, growth, and wealth are generated, that is, and it has to be, if it's going to be effective, it has to be a free market. So that's where we're going to differ with the mainstream view. Now, the kind of economics that supports industrial policy is actually closer to the way real-world businesses work than the so-called version of economics you get most academics in this country. And the reason is that businesses necessarily make money by exploiting market imperfections, by exploiting situations where the market is not perfectly free, because where you have perfect competition, competition squeezes profits towards zero. The first thing you learn in business school is if you see a free market, you run screaming in the opposite direction. You want to be in a business that has pricing power. It's what Warren Buffett famously called a moat. Free markets are great when you're the customer because it drives down the price with a free competition. When you're the producer, when you're the seller, you want the opposite. Now, one implication of this is that the consumer side view of economics and the producer side view of economics differ. And one way to understand industrial policy thinking is to grasp that mainstream U.S. economics is biased to consider almost entirely the consumer point of view, or it thinks it is. They call this consumer sovereignty. It's an idea laissez-faire ideologues are very much nominally in favor of. Whereas industrial policy thinking recognizes that there are two sides to the economy, and you can't understand everything simply from the consumption side. So, in fact, one description you can give of industrial policy thinking is, just as Reagan and his boys had supply side economics in the 80s, you can call this production side economics. It's not only production, but you're giving the production side of the economy equal time with the consumption side, which hasn't happened in a long time. Now, in terms of what makes industrial policy make sense, it's based on three propositions. Number one, economic activities differ in value. Number two, a laissez-faire policy is not going to maximize a nation's capture of the most valuable economic activities. And then number three, government intervention, if you get it right, of course, can enable the capture of more That is, the more of the valuable economic activities. So the idea is that using government policies to overcome and in many situations take advantage of market shortcomings is how industrial policy can grow, attract, and retain high value, or in terminology sometimes used, advantageous economic activities and the industries that host them.